Hello, my dear audiences, my lovely fellow Americans. Welcome to the show, Jack Chow on East West with G&E TV. Talking about the coming election 2016. We started already. As a matter of fact, if you do a little comparison about each election, this year was started even earlier than what we used to do. Yet, right now, we do not see anything, in spite of the fact that we started early. So it is getting more and more mystifying. On one hand, we see those debates going, well, each has done one time already. And on the other, we do not see anything yet. So to get to the point, like I say, every time I have a crying baby, I bring crying baby to the mother. The mother being my good friend, the presidential advisor on the advisory board of both President Bush 41 and 43. That is Honorable Mr. James Lee. Welcome, sir, to the show.
Always good to be back.
All right, thank you. Mr. James Lee, after serving on the Presidential Advisory Board, came back to California. He was once a spokesman for former Governor Will Peterson, and later he founded his own firm, advisory firm, Lee Strategy.
Right.
All right. So you're everything. All right. Good. So my first question, matter of fact, it's not a question, because to be honest, I'm even lost in the ocean of questions. I don't know what to pick first.
Okay.
Right? So now, what do we see so far?
Well, I mean, like I said before, I mean, this is we're very, very early in the election process. The first voting in the primaries and the caucuses doesn't start till February. So we're not even into fall yet, really. So you have to remember that as you go back in other presidential elections, the 2012 race, the 2008 race, and so forth, even going back to 2000, the races are getting longer because you have 24-hour cable news shows now, Fox, CNN, and so forth, MSNBC. You have social media, and the discussion about politics is taking on a 365-day-a-year cycle now. So most people are frankly kind of burned out already on the election process because we haven't even really started yet. So and because it's only the primary season, the people who are engaged tend to be the most passionate. So in the Republican side, you tend to see a lot of Tea Party, a lot of religious conservatives. On the Democratic side, you tend to see liberal progressives and environmentalists, and the folks in both parties who are on the extreme sides of their parties, which is why you see people like Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump and Ben Carson kind of rise to the forefront early on. It's the same pattern that you see in every election. I mean, the last election, Herman Cain came out as the early front runner. In 2000, you saw Bill Bradley challenge Al Gore, who was a sitting vice president. So these things always take on a kind of a predictable pattern. And what I usually tell people is to not really worry about the early stuff. You wait till you get into the spring after the holidays, and that's when we get into the meat of the campaigns.
Yeah, all right, all right. I appreciate it very much about this kind of the comfort statement. I feel a little better now. But still, the thing is that, after the 8 years, almost 8 years of the current presidency, people start to get a little tired of hearing those lip services. And on the other hand, we do not see anything yet. So the urge of wanting to see something newer is growing.
Well, look, I think anytime you have a two-term presidency, there's always it's always a very difficult time for the incumbent party to try to win it again. I mean, in the last 30, 40 years, the only person that was able to do it was George H.W. Bush after 2 terms of Ronald Reagan, and even he couldn't get it passed into a second term. So it's an exceptionally difficult thing to do. I mean, you look at Al Gore and how he was unable to win after Bill Clinton. So the challenge that Hillary Clinton has, Bernie Sanders has, and the other Democrats is that following 8 years of President Obama, they're fighting the trend of people wanting to have some other kind of voice, some other kind of different pathway. I think that on the Democratic side, that's why you see, for example, Mrs. Clinton kind of stake out different positions. and frankly do a couple flip-flops on things like Keystone Pipeline, the Trans-Pacific Trade Pact proposal and stuff like that. So I think, there is a desire by a lot of candidates to, quote, be fresh and new, which is in large part why people like Donald Trump and Ben Carson and folks like that and Bernie Sanders have kind of surged to the forefront, because what they're espousing is radically different than what we've seen for the past 8 years.
Okay, to take a look at the debates, the Republican debate and then the last week Democratic debate, though. Let's talk about Democratic first, though. How did they do? Did they do a good job when they, as a party, is concerned?
Well, I think, there were a lot of expectations for the Democrats on their stage. It was twofold. One, the big question, can Hillary Clinton kind of rebound after the drubbing she'd been taking at the polls recently? I think she did do that. I think, if you look, for example, the Wall Street Journal NBC poll that just came out today showed that she rebounded, pushed and increased her lead over Bernie Sanders. The interesting thing about that poll is that it wasn't so much Hillary added numbers, she only added a few percentage points. It was the decline in support for Bernie Sanders, which brought the margin back to where it was before, all the email scandals, stuff like that happened. And I think that's in large part the fact that, a lot of people that have been very enthusiastic about Bernie Sanders, when Bernie kind of chose not to confront Hillary on trust issues and the email and stuff like that, and in fact almost, rescued her when he said, let's not talk about these damn emails anymore. I think people who were thinking that Bernie was going to be a serious candidate and the guy who wanted to win the presidency were frankly a little bit disappointed. He has enormous grassroots support, enormous support for people who really believe that he'd be a change maker as president, and the fact that he failed to take the opportunity to push Hillary aside, I think disappointed a large amount of his supporters, which is why that gap has grown again.
How do you comment the fact that Bernie Sanders even openly recognized himself as socialist?
Well, I mean,
to be more precise, Democratic Socialist.
Well, I mean, first of all, Bernie Sanders is an independent out of Vermont, a very independent state, and Bernie is an avowed socialist. So it's unusual and I think part of it is that we say the word socialism, but a lot of people may not really technically understand what that means.
Okay.
So I think part of the problem is that there are very few socialist countries left in the world, because socialism generally is a failed experiment. Socialism, largely involves the nationalization of industries, the nationalization of entire businesses. The government runs everything. So it works largely in small countries like in Scandinavia, like Sweden and stuff like that. But, in a country like the United States, which is so deeply embedded in capitalism, it would be an utter failure. So I think that what resonates with people with Bernie is not so much the fact that he's quote unquote a socialist, but his talk about equal opportunity, the income wage gap, and railing against Wall Street and stuff like that. That has a lot of resonance for a lot of people who felt that they, haven't really bounced back from the 2008 recession.
To me, it's quite a different issue if he is labeled by somebody else as a Democratic Socialist. That's one thing. However, he called himself...
Well, yeah. I mean, Bernie's the first one to tell you he's a socialist.
Yeah, he called himself a socialist. And then the fact that he does call himself a socialist, he must want to make an issue, right? What is the issue in his mind he wants to make? Trying to debate with Clinton, there must be something in there.
Well, I mean, Bernie's been very clear about his aims. I mean, he's a socialist. He wants to nationalize a lot of businesses and industries. He wants to regulate Wall Street back into a period where the free market doesn't exist. He wants to put, for example, the Glass-Steagall Act back in, where he would separate investment banking from regular banking. All those things would absolutely destroy our economy, for lack of a better term. And I think that a lot of people really don't understand. But what resonates for a lot of people about Bernie is the idea of everything's free. Free health care, free education, free college, get a free car. So everything in Bernie's case, it relates around that whole idea of inequality. So socialism seeks to level the playing field by nationalizing everything and having government be the primary factor in providing things for the American people. So, look, Bernie's message is a great message if you are interested in handouts, which is basically what socialism is. Get something for nothing. And I think that You know, Mrs. Clinton had an opportunity to kind of push back on that a little bit. She really didn't engage that much because she has her own agenda in terms of trying to repair her image and make herself more credible, which I think she did a good job on. If you look at the other Democrats in the race, for example, Jim Webb announced today that he's actually going to drop out of the Democratic race and he's going to run as an independent. And
Webb is that, yeah.
And I think that was going to happen anyway. He didn't have very much support in the Democratic Party. I think Lincoln Chafee really didn't help himself because, frankly, it was a very odd performance on his part. And, you know, Martin O'Malley, I think, is still, you know, trying to keep himself alive as a person who probably took Hillary Clinton on the hardest on issues like the email and trustworthiness and honesty and stuff like that. The problem the Democrats have, and as you move into the general election portion of the campaign, is that Hillary Clinton may enjoy a lot of support, but the basic issues about her character really, you know, harm her. You know, when every poll consistently puts her at 60% untrustworthy and not honest, you know, that's a difficult thing. So it's going to be really interesting to see, you know, for example, if Vice President Biden is actually going to enter the race.
Yeah, no, I was exactly going to ask
you know,
about him.
Fox News announced, you know, today that they thought they heard, or there's some rumor or some validation that Vice President Biden was going to make an announcement to enter the race. You know, I don't know where that's at. If you look at the Wall Street Journal poll that came out today, the gap between people who were for Biden and now are for Hillary or think that his time or opportunity is past,
Back to him, yeah.
you know, is gone by. You know, I still believe that Vice President Biden is going to enter the race. You don't run for president twice before and lose the vote.
All right. Okay, my dear audience, this is one of the very, very precious moments that we get a chance to touch base with a veteran politician, I call you that way. Former advisor for President Bush, both 41 and 43, and a spokesman for former governor of California, Pete Wilson, and the founder and CEO of Lee Strategy, Honorable James Lee. So let's take a very short moment now. When we come back, we'll pick up Joe Biden as a talking point because he really holds the core of the issue, regardless of how much a job he can do. But anyway, let's come back. So I'll see you right away.